Vă rugăm să vă așezați. Începem sesiunea.
So we will start the second session of the annual reunion of the Romanian diplomacy in the presence of His Excellency Mr. Xavier Bettel and Mrs. Odobescu and Mrs. Ana Tinka, State Secretary, will moderate the meeting.
Ministers, distinguished colleagues, distinguished ambassadors, I would also like to warmly welcome you to the annual meeting of the Romanian diplomacy. It's a distinctive pleasure for me to moderate this first plenary session. The topic, multiple crises, is one that we have addressed before in our meetings from different angles, but unfortunately the discussion remains very timely and also necessary. Indeed, today Europe is surrounded by problems, and it has been so for many years. Some of these problems remain latent as challenges on the long run. Others have burst into full-scale wars with all the subsequent risks for European security. It's hard to make a comprehensive list, but one could distill these challenges into at least three categories. First, the hotspots, the war in Ukraine, the conflict in Gaza, but not forgetting the protracted conflicts and the deep political and increasingly military instability in Africa and the Middle East. Then the long-term challenges, out of which climate change and illegal migration have been singled out recently by most Europeans as the top two dangers for our citizens. Last but not least, and I would say on the background of it all, the threats to the stability and integrity of the rules-based international order, which challenge not only Western leadership, but also our values. All these require action now, and I think that there is no question that preserving peace and ensuring prosperity in Europe remain our undisputed goals. To achieve this, NATO and the EU served as the main tools in the toolkit. It worked for Western Europe 60 or 70 years ago. It worked well for Central Europe more recently, and I belong myself to a generation whose maturity is inextricably linked to Romania's adhesion to the political West. Therefore, I cannot envisage better tools than NATO and the European Union to address the challenges ahead of us. But of course, the question is, what can we do more? What can we do better in order to improve our response and to adapt this organization for the challenges ahead? To discuss these important topics, we have the privilege to have two very distinguished guests: the Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Development Cooperation and Foreign Trade from Luxembourg, Xavier Bettel, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania, Mrs. Luminița Odobescu. Let me first welcome our foreign guest. And Minister Bettel, let me start by saying that Luxembourg is a country with strong and solid bonds with Romania. For the Romanian diplomats, Luxembourg is known, of course, for many reasons, but I would say there are at least three features that come to mind. First, I would say Luxembourg is well known for its pro-enlargement policy. And this is something very dear to us because the EU accession treaty of Romania was signed in a famous abbey in Luxembourg. And Luxembourg remained a pro-enlargement country even when the popularity of the topic in Europe was decreasing. Second, Luxembourg manages to bring to the table, both within the European Union but also in NATO, a critical balance through wisdom, moderation, and the principled position, things that we need, I would say now, more than ever around our tables. And last but not least, Luxembourg is a country strongly committed to the Eastern flank. Despite its remoteness and the size of its military capabilities, Luxembourg is present and visible also in Romania. And for all this reason, your country has earned appreciation and respect also with us. And I would end by saying that maybe not a big country in terms of land area or population, Luxembourg is definitely a country that has shown constantly commitment to the big common European interest, and we are very grateful for that. Our second very distinguished guest is Minister Odobescu. She does not need any introduction, especially in this format. But let me say something, because I refer to what Luxembourg brings to the table. And I would say that just like Luxembourg, Romania as well is known and often appreciated for its moderation, for its principled position within the European Union and within NATO, for our genuine willingness to build bridges and to construct consensus. And we have proven that throughout the years, but perhaps one of the clearest evidence stems from our first EU Council presidency 5 years ago. And I'm really proud to say that Minister Odobescu was a key figure in that process as well. So without further ado, dear Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anna. Dear Vice Prime Minister, Chair Xavier, dear colleagues, allow me first to warmly welcome Vice Prime Minister Bettel to Romania. Cher Xavier, je te remercie beaucoup pour ta disponibilité. C'est vraiment un honneur de t'avoir aujourd'hui avec nous. So, dear colleagues, Luxembourg and Minister, my colleague, is a true friend of Romania. So, and I would like to express our gratitude for what you have done always for our country, since our accession to the EU, our accessions to the NATO, strong supporter for our accession to Schengen. Strong supporter of our accession to Schengen. And as Anna indicated, you don't have a big army, but you are present in Romania, showing your solidarity and your commitment towards the eastern flank. So there are a lot of issues which united us, but first of all, it's about people. And I'm really grateful to you that you are with us today discussing a very, very important topic for all of us, not only for Romania, having the longest land border with Ukraine, having practically a war at our border, and we have seen again last night with the attack of Russia against Ismail. It's very close to Romania. So, but not only, the crises are all around the globe. For quite a few years, history is upon us. As I said, the crises around the world intensify and proliferate, but they have a recurrent pattern, and this is, in our view, revisionism. It consists of deliberate and systematic actions of undermining the rules-based international order and its core principles. Firstly, we have a form of hard revisionism perpetrated by state actors or non-state actors employing force or the threat of use of force. And Russia is the most obvious example. I will not enter in details, we all know what it's about. Secondly, there is another form of revisionism perpetrated by hybrid means. And recently, in all our formats, in EU, NATO, we had long discussions on how to counter the hybrid threats. It is in some ways more dangerous. It marks the ground for kinetic actions or spreads distrust and weakens our societies as it touches all aspects of our lives and societies. And you know that it's harder or impossible to detect and difficult to counter. It spreads lies, it disrupts our daily lives by hacking into electricity grids or stealing our health records, postal service, pipelines. I mean, the list is really very long. What can we do in face of this crisis, threats and challenges? This is the question for all of us. Of course, first of all, we have to identify and map the crisis. This is the first step. But also we need to stand firmly together in front of a sweeping wave of revisionism to counter the repeated assaults by conventional and non-conventional threats and never yield to the temptation of compromise. It is also important to try to have a single, joint action, joint reaction, which is not always easy in the current security context, because the crises we are facing are very complex. We have a lot of questions, of course, but we have to work together to find solutions, and this is what we are doing, in fact, together. And it's a joint effort, and I'm really, as I said, grateful to you and to Luxembourg that we not only share the same views, but we are really working together. And of course, there are new things also for us, because no one imagined that we will face a war in Europe. No one expected to face a huge Russian propaganda. No one expected, or no one was or is prepared for the hybrid threats. But together we can do it, and together we can find solutions, starting with education of our society, starting with working together as foreign ministries. This is what we have done also, to adapt the structure of our foreign ministry to this new challenge, putting all our resources together, discussing in a very transparent way. It is true that it's not only the responsibility of foreign ministry, but our responsibility, especially in this security context, is essential. And I underline in my speech today that we as foreign ministries, we became part of the national security system, because security, at least for us in Europe, became our first priority. Security in a broader sense, because we are speaking not only about military security, but also we are speaking about the resilience of our society, democratic society. We are speaking about food security, energy security, critical infrastructure security. So yes, it is difficult. We face a lot of crises all around the globe, but I think it's also our responsibility and our commitment to work together to find solutions to this crisis. So again, thank you for being with us. It's really important to show to our colleagues, but not only to our colleagues, that we can do a lot if we stay together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think that already some very important points have been raised about what we can do together, but also about what we should do at national level. The fact that resilience is very much needed these days, and the whole of government approach is no longer enough. We actually need a whole of society approach. With this, Minister Bettel, the floor is yours.
Mulțumesc pentru invitație. But I will continue in English. So the first thing I would like to say thank you to you, because I have witnesses from Luxembourg. You said that Luxembourg, and I take it personally, are wisdom people. So I will have to explain it to my husband that someone found that out. And the second thing is I wanted, Luminița, to say thank you to you, because I was Prime Minister for 10 years, and I can tell you that also with Klaus Johannes or with you, I always had partners where we have different histories, we have different traditions, cultures, languages, but we have same goals. And you said before that Luxembourg is participating also. So yesterday I was in Cinku to visit also the Luxembourg militaries. There are 26 or 27, and I was happy to see all of them. And you did the right choice also to ask the French to cook. But it is so important to see that we are together, because you said something, and I want to start with that for common problems we need common answers. Because the biggest error is nowadays that very often for common problems we think that we have national answers and this will be the right one, which is always wrong. So the topic is multiple crises. So as I told you, I was first time elected in Parliament in 1999, so last century. Thank you, Dr. Aslan, for the one who knows this works well. The fact is, we always had crises. We always had crises. We just forgot all the crises we had. We had the subprime crisis, we had the banking crisis, we had international crisis, we had European crisis, we had even national crisis. Luxembourg, I remember when I became the Prime Minister, we had a national crisis because of the LuxLeaks situation. It was a big, difficult situation where, in fact, we had to change a lot of things. And for me, it was important to be compliant, to be not in the corner, but this was difficult. Then you had the migration crisis. I remember the Greek crisis where we had meetings in Brussels during days to know how we would find a solution for the euro also, and with Greece. And I could continue all the crises that we had. But this time we have some different crises. The first thing is we have a war situation on our ground, and I just want to remind that we always thought after the Second World War that we would never had a war. And I belong to a generation, I have to admit, I never lived a war, I never had a dictatorship. I grew up without asking myself what could happen tomorrow. I grew up like that. Nowadays I have to do it. And when we speak about the situation in Ukraine, when we speak about the situation also in Palestine and Israel, when we speak about the situation in Africa, when we speak even in the situation in Latin America, when we speak the situation in Taiwan, we have in fact tensions, political tensions, who could bring to more difficult situations like that. So, and already nightmare for Ukrainian and for Palestinians also. I know when we speak about Palestine, we should never forget that there are still hostages from the Hamas. But believe me, and this is human. I've been to Israel also and to Palestine. We see that even when we have common problems, because it is a problem nowadays, which is a common problem too, because I don't know how it's in Romania, but you can feel that the Israelo-Palestinian problem, it's not only there. It's a debate in all world countries, where you see even that Israelis feel threatened and Arabians feel not considered. And so we might even have conflicts in our own countries between two religious communities for something which is not happening in our own country. And when you go there, you see that the international law is, and that we are in fact not able to find common solutions, because even we can ask, on the ground, there are still civilians dying every day. And it is human that the day after the attack from the Hamas, everybody was solidary with Israel. Then when we saw the pictures from Palestine, the solidarity was shrinking. Then we saw the attacks from Iran, then everybody was in favor of Israel. And now we see the images of Rafah and everything. So it's human. It's fully human. But for us, we see that we have no common solutions. And I just want to say that we can vote things at the UN. We have no impact when unilaterally a country is deciding things. So we already have also on European level difficulties even to do sanctions against violent settlers. So you see that the limitations of finding common solutions is very, very often difficult. Today, when we speak about crisis too, we see that we should avoid to push some countries in other arms. I'm speaking now very openly. I'm sorry. I know that it's public and everything, but I can't say not the things I want to say. Sorry for my team. The fact is, we should avoid to put China in Russian arms. There is a risk if we say to China all the time that they are bad guys, that they're the same than Russia, etc., that we push them in Russian arms. I know that the relation with China is not the easiest one. But we should avoid to have a splitted world where you will be or in favor of Putin, or you have to be against Putin. And there are some countries, they are not in favor of Putin. But if we push them, they won't be even in a position to say that they are against Putin. And I'm speaking now about China, but I could speak also about India and other countries. So we should avoid to push also countries in other directions. So we should try, and to have a peace conference is very nice, and I'm happy that Volodymyr Zelensky said also that he wants one now with Russia, because if we want a solution, we will need China, and we will need Russia also on board. And I remember when I shocked everyone when I was the Prime Minister and said that the only one who can solve this problem the last 12 months would be Biden and Xi Jinping. The two with Putin and with Zelensky, the one who could find a solution. Because I think that the American elections in October might be also a game changer, and it will be not in the interest of the Ukrainians if they are not strong at that moment. So it is important to also concentrate the support to Ukraine now. So the crises are this war situation, and I'm not speaking now about Africa, because the coups we have in Mali, in Burkina, in Niger, that situation between RDC and Rwanda and the Burundi. So it's very, very delicate everywhere. And when I say delicate, I'm polite. It's explosive, where sometimes we don't need that much to have a really difficult moments. So this is the first, if I speak crisis, war crisis, but provoked by humans. I just want to remind, provoked by humans, because we have some crises who are provoked by humans, but where, because when we speak about the climate, because very often when we speak about the war, we forget the climate. We have a climate crisis since years, and we should not forget that we are responsible for it, but it's difficult to change the habits, but we need to do it, and there also we need global answers. When you speak about crisis, I don't want to remind a terrible time, but this was for me the most difficult time I had in my political career, was the COVID crisis. The COVID crisis was a very difficult crisis because we speak about common solutions. But at the end, I just want to remind that at the airports, we were fighting each other to buy the materials, even to steal the material from others at the airports. We speak about solidarity. But as soon as we are in crisis, we have the national reflex. And there Europe was the answer. I don't want to be misunderstood, but I'm convinced that if Germany or France would have been the producer, but Germans especially, because the French products were not that fast, the German products, if Germany would have decided, and not Europe would have decided to buy, they would have then the reflex to say, first we need Germans first. So the Germans will get the vaccines, and then afterwards we will sell it. My country, I have 600,000 inhabitants. I have money, I would have paid. But how would you have explained in the whole European Union that depending of the budget of the country, you will have the right to get the vaccine or not? So it was important to have a common solution to that crisis, which is the COVID crisis. But it showed us another thing, it's that we are fully dependent on others. We are dependent, and usually when we speak about digitalization nowadays, about the AI, everything, we are squeezed as European Union between the States and Asia. We are squeezed. And when we say that everything might be digital tomorrow, it's a nightmare if we are not ready as a European Union to have really an ambitious program to be, not squeezed, but a partner. And for the moment, I don't see us there. I'm sorry, but everything in the artificial intelligence comes from the US or from Asia. We are not present. Very often also because we are a union, but we are also 27 competitors. We still have no common market, we still have no common regulations, we still have 27 legislations if you want to have the digital market in Europe, etc. And so I could continue like that. So on that topic too, we might have a crisis which will be, in fact, nationally, very often that for the digital agenda, we have the capitals, and we have the young generations, and we have a fracture in the country with my mother. She's 81, she doesn't know how to do e-health, she doesn't know how to do the bank transfer with the phone, she still needs the paper. And also the people living not in a capital, who lives in villages where they don't have the 5G, because they are not connected, where they don't have the fiber. So this might be something where we do ourselves also a potential, not crisis, but a fracture in our own countries, and also in some countries in Europe where they will be behind the others. So we need also to be very ambitious on that. I'm sorry, we have so many crises that I continue. Then we have a crisis of trust. We have a crisis of trust. When we had the COVID, I had to convince people that what they read on Facebook was not the right information. We need to invest in a free and public press. We need to invest in the press in general. Because if we don't if we don't invest in press, we should not forget that today, especially the young generations, we pay a fee to get the papers in the morning in our house. Nowadays, young people, they don't want to pay to get informations because they have it directly. And remember when we started politics, the journalist called you, he said, I have an information, could you check it? I need the information at 6 o'clock tonight because then we will go to print. Now they call you at 9, they say, I need an answer in the next hour, or I will put it online. Because it's the politic of the clicks. The more clicks you get, the more interaction you get, the higher you will be able also to sell the advertisement. And this is a problem of trust nowadays, that where we had, as politicians, a trust, where we had also as a press, the trust from the people, this is shrinking too. And so nowadays, people through social media are also able to get the information. And so we need to be able to fight against the disinformation, which is a crisis also of trust. And we see it also in the political result. I don't need to speak about what happened in the European Parliament last week. But this is a result from mistrust from people. Where through social media they get convinced, but not through informations, not through a program. When we speak about the energy crisis, I just want to remind, because nobody speaks about it, but when we started the discussions about the sanctions against Russia, the biggest fear was, will we have enough gas? Will we have enough energy for next winter? And we did it because we had a European solution. We found a common solution too. This was important for me too. When we speak about, I have the migration, I have the rise of extremism, I have a lot of other topics, but for me, I don't want to be too long because I think interactivity is important. But the migration crisis is something which is important to know that most of our populations in Europe, we were migrants too, once in our history. Luxembourg in the 19th century was a poor country. Everybody forgot that. And we became rich because we discovered steel, and then we had a successful steel industry. And then we realized that steel wouldn't be forever. Then we did finances, we did services, we did satellites, and now SAS, it's one of the most important satellites company in the world. And this is always because as a small country, we always want to be not the one who can do things that others cannot do, but being better than the others, being a first mover. Very often when you're a small country, you have a good idea, they all say, ha, 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 ha. And then when it's success, they say, let's do it. And 5 years later, they said they took the initiative, but that's normal, that's always like that. but it's a question also of being, and that's what you said, Luminița, and I fully agree, to be ready to give up something. Because when I spoke about social media, when I spoke about information, the 10 years as a prime minister, the European Council was very often, how will I be able to do my press statement by saying that I didn't give up anything and I had a success? No politicians in Brussels were there to say, maybe today we had to give up something, but we know that tomorrow we'll have something bigger together. Because our public opinions, our national public opinions, want successes. And we as politicians want to have fast successes. We don't want to be, to say that, you will see in 10 years, you will say that I was a good leader. Because the fact is we want to be re-elected 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later. And so it is very difficult to explain that to do things in common, sometimes it's better for the future. So I think it's, I can't remember who said it, maybe it was Churchill or I can't remember, but usually when you don't know, you always say Churchill, you have 50-50. It's when you are alone, you go faster. But when you go together, you go longer. And this is right. And this is right. So I believe, and I was also in Brussels when we had the NATO summit with Donald, where he had the list of all the countries, what we were paying for the NATO. And so it was a moment, I just want to remind that the French president said that NATO was brain dead at that moment. NATO was never as active than today. And for me, as I told you, growing up in a peaceful situation, I never thought that I would have to explain to my voters that I'm convinced that we need more military expenses. I never. But I'm convinced nowadays that if we don't have a strong military force, then we are weak. And today, we cannot be weak when we see how other countries' behavior are. Because yesterday it was Georgia. You know what's Transnistria? I don't need to speak about it here. You know what's Ukraine? You know what is Georgia? Who will be next if we are weak? But I don't want to open a race where countries will have to choose, as I told you at the beginning. I really believe that we need exchanges, that we need people like, I'm sorry to say it in front of her, but we need people like you, Luminița, who tries to build these bridges between the countries, who are active in politics not with their own ego, but with a common goal. So thank you so much for inviting me today. Thank you very much for having listened to me. If you have questions, for example, how will end the war in Israel and Palestine, I can't tell you. I don't know. If you ask me how it's going to be in Ukraine and tomorrow, I can't tell you. But I can guarantee that here you have two people sitting here who will continue to fight for international law and for not the forces of the strongest, but of a union of respect, of law, of rights, of rule of law, and especially of dialogue between the countries. Our answers, our wish would be to have more exchanges and less to speak about each other, but to each other. So thank you very much for the work you're doing.
Thank you very much, Minister Bettel, for this extremely interesting and thought-provoking presentation and for pointing out to the challenges from abroad, but also from the challenges from within. And no matter how difficult it is, I think that indeed the answer is always together, together as Europe, together with our like-minded partners. And again, it might be difficult, it might take a long time to get the message across to all those we need to reach to, but indeed there is no alternative to dealing with the crisis today. With this, I'll open the floor for comments and answers from my colleagues. Since I have limited visibility over the room, please, I would kindly invite you to introduce yourself. Ambassador Neculaescu. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Secretary Tinka. Thank you very much, Diana.